What's up, everybody? Chicago Goonie here, bringing another Arsenal talk. In this Arsenal talk, I'll cover a few stories that have surfaced over the last few days or so that needs to be talked about. At least some, opinions that need to be, taken off my chest and just to be talked about as far as Arsenal Football Club goes. Those topics would be, the Thierry Henry saga that just unfolded, and of course a little bit of transfer stuff as well. But to go right into the Thierry Henry saga of him leaving Arsenal for choosing, not leaving, but yeah, I guess you can say he left, but again for the second time, um, that he chose Sky Sports over Arsenal. Um, it, this whole thing is just it smells like shit. Really, it really does. Former player, legend of the club, probably one of the more higher profile players of the club. Everybody loves him, blah blah blah, and he does his coaching badges to get his coaching badges so he can start maybe even coaching or managing, or at least be on the bench in a lower tier side, as far as like Championship, League One, League Two, um, in the English game or even around the world. Um, and of course, these badges coming up were supposed to be for his pro license. And again, once again, Arsenal was going to give him the platform to do it in. I read a article on Goal.com. Their transfer news sucks, but as far as their articles go about certain players and teams, they're pretty decent. But reading this article that Yonkers, who is the head of the academy currently, I believe this is his last season though, at Arsenal. He's going to be moving on from after this season, but he was going to allow Thierry Henry, because of his busy schedule, quote unquote, with his punditry work, that he was going to allow him to only coach 1 day a week. Not two, not three, not four, what a coach should be doing, especially if you're trying to get your badges, but he was going to allow him to only coach 1 day a week, which is, to me, I think that's wrong. When you're trying to introduce a coach and he's trying to coach up players, say he's trying to do the strikers and whatnot. Um, but there's another position coach that takes over for him after he leaves, that he does his 1 day. Let's say his position coach that is there all the time says one thing, Terry says another. It's going to confuse the kids, the under 18 group, of what they should be doing and how they should be training. I think if you're going to be a coach, you need to do it full time rather than just part time. Um, I know if you maybe coach some of the younger kids, maybe like an under 12 or an under 10 or something like that, that you can pass that off pretty easily. But when you're talking about the under 18s, who, these kids are almost ready to sign their first professional contract and to start making money in this game rather than just being a player and learning and into the academy and preparing them to be a professional. So I think that's really a gray area that I do not like at all. That they were going to allow him to just coach 1 day a week and do his punditry work. Unfortunately for Thierry Henry, he thinks he can have his cake and eat it too. Um, Let me just make this clear. I mean, if you listen to my videos, you pretty much know that I'm on the Wenger outside. We need new blood. We need a new manager in place. I'm not going to go all into it, but I'm Wenger out. But in this instance, he is 100% correct. What Thierry Henry would be doing is a conflict of interest. And let me paint a picture here for you. Let's say he just does this 1 day a week. He's on the training ground, coaching up the under 18s. Say the senior team is on the other side of the field. I think they have about like four, five, six different fields in which like all the teams can train on. So let's say he's on one side, the senior team's on the other side. The senior team, you know, they, they get done with their practice. They start walking back to the training facility to, you know, get changed up and go home. Terry does the same thing, but at nighttime he goes to Sky Sports and does his punditry work. And let's say Arsenal has a bad string of games. They're not winning, they're drawing too much, certain players aren't playing well, and he just starts bashing them. Much like the Olivier Giroud bashing that he did about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, saying that Arsenal will never win the title with him as the main striker. Now he tried to say that was taken out of context and everything like that, blah blah blah, but that's exactly what he meant. And so let's say he does that. Let's say he bashes Ozil. Let's say he bashes Giroud again. Let's say he bashes Alexis Sanchez, Koscielny, any player that plays for Arsenal. But then another day comes, another week comes, and this senior team has to walk past him. It's a conflict of interest. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. You can't be on the training ground one day coaching up an Arsenal team, a future Arsenal players, possibly, and then bash the senior team on top of that. You just can't do it. It's a conflict of interest. It's bad blood. Let's say that Thierry Henry was going to be fast tracked, something like Zinedine Zidane over at Real Madrid. That's how he started. He started with the academy. But then once Jose Mourinho, I think in his last season with Real Madrid, he was sitting on the bench learning from the manager. Carlo Ancelotti, same thing for 2 years. Rafa Benitez, before he took over at Real Madrid, once they fired Benitez halfway through the season, maybe they were going to do that with Thierry Henry. But like Arsene Wenger, he's not going to tell him that. So then he thinks he can do whatever he wants because, oh, I'm going to be Arsenal manager in a couple of years anyway. It's a conflict of interest. You have to want this. I wouldn't be so pissed off at Thierry Henry as I am right now if he didn't make it public. You know, the second he retired, even before he retired at the New York Red Bulls, he said he wants to be a manager. He wants to get into coaching and be a manager in the future, in the near future, not say 4, 5, 6 years down the road after he gets his badges and gets some experience under his belt. No, he wants to be a manager almost instantly. And this is the big problem I have right now with Terry Henry and his ego. And when players play, they are treated in a way that they're gods, not only by the fans but the club itself. Especially when you're a legend of the game. Especially when you have the talent that Terry Henry did throughout his entire career. He changed games. He was one of the best strikers you ever see, and he got catered to time and time again by every club that he went to. But now he's not a player. He's not in the limelight anymore. Of course, he's going to stay in the limelight because of the punditry work, and I think that's exactly what he wants. Because let's face it, once a player career ends, the limelight's not on them anymore. They don't have that attention, that constant attention, especially in this day and age of social media. They don't have people talking about them every second of the day. They're not on Twitter making tweets about them every second of the day. So what do? They go to punditry work so they can stay in the limelight, so they can have that spotlight shined on them still, and so they can tell all their old stories about when I was with this club, that club, when I played against this team, that team, this goal, that goal. They want to stay in that limelight, and that's how Terry Henry is. He has a huge ego. You could date back to when he left us the first time. What was his saying? Oh, I'm a competitor. I'm a competitor. If you were such a competitor, you would have stayed with Arsenal and try to rebuild within the club, and really showed your real love for the club instead of turning your back and saying I'm a competitor. I want to go to Barcelona and win things. Yes, we had a young squad after the Invincibles started to retire and getting old, but there's still a lot of good pieces, a lot of good players on those Arsenal teams from 2007-8 season until that basically when Cesc left. That's when the the dam broke basically. Nasri, Clichy, all these guys left almost at the same time. RVP the following year, but we still had enough pieces in place that we could have been still competitive. Probably even with Terry Henry on at the top, still winning games, still possibly winning titles. But what did he do? He turned it back. Went to Barcelona. This time, same thing, man. turns his back on us, chooses fucking money and the spotlight over Arsenal, who was willing to give him the platform, willing to probably fast track him, give him a spot on the bench at some point with Arsene Wenger, because let's be honest, it looks more and more every day that he's going to sign another 2 year contract. And maybe they would put him on the bench after he would get his pro license, because that's the only way he can be on the bench. And it's just, unless, if Terry came out earlier and just said, you know what, I want to take my time with this coaching thing. I don't know if it's the right thing for me to do right now, but I know in the future I want to be a coach and I want to be a manager. But right now, I'm just trying to breathe and I'm trying to get used to, you know, not playing every day and not going to training every day and blah, 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 this. But he never said that. He wanted his cake and eat it too, and it blew up in his face because Arsene Wenger did the right thing. If you want to be a manager, if you want to be a coach, you have to give it 100%. You can't just half ass it. You just can't do one day a fucking week. Now, Arsene Wenger, he threw him a bone through this last year and a half while he was coaching up the under 16 teams to get his first process of coaching badges. He threw him a bone for the last year and a half to allow him to still do punditry work and whatnot. But this is it. Once they promoted him to the under 18 team, especially with Tony Adams, thank God he's back in the club. He's only going to do wonders, I think, for some of those kids and show them how to really win and show them what it really takes to be a professional footballer. But with Terry, he wanted to just do that one day a week and coast right through. This isn't him as a player anymore. It's such a different side of football that he's not accustomed to. When you're a player, like I said, they cater to the players and they give them everything almost that they want. But when you're a manager, it's a completely different story. It's a 24/7 out. It's a 24/7 job. When you look at the season, when you look at transfer windows, when you're looking at the academy, see who's going to be coming up, who's good enough to stay, who's not good enough to stay. It's 24/7 job. And Terry, obviously, he wasn't ready for it. But then there's rumors right now that West Ham and I forgot the other team that was interested in possibly giving him that opportunity to get his next phase of his coaching badges, which pisses me off. If he does that, fuck him. I'm sorry. I don't ever want him to coach a single day, be the manager a single day at Arsenal Football Club, because how many times does someone have to fuck us for us to finally realize, you know what, this guy's not good enough. He only cares about himself. And it's just, it just pisses me off. The other thing that pisses me off is watching Twitter over these last, 2, 3 days of this thing blowing up, of how many idiot Arsenal fans are out there blaming Arsene Wenger for this. Like I said, I want him out. But in no shape or form, when the first headlines came out, I blamed Arsene because it was a shit headline saying that Arsene Wenger forced Thierry Henry out of the club. But what it didn't say is that Arsene Wenger actually gave him an ultimatum to say you cannot do both, which he's 100% correct on. It's a conflict of interest. And if you don't know what that means, if you don't know what a conflict of interest is, look it up. You can't do one thing that's going to hurt the other. And it would have. It would have. Because at some point he was going to be asked a tough question on the air about Arsenal, and he would have had to answer it because that's his job. And if he would have did some type of negative response to it, let's say in 2 years that he's fast tracked, and half the team, maybe half the team is gone in the next 2 years or 3 years or something. He becomes Arsenal manager, and there's several guys that he bashed openly on Sky Sports. Would you play for that? Would you play for that manager? Would you play for Thierry Henry, who, for the last 2 or 3 years bashed you openly on a public network? No, I wouldn't play for him. I'd tell him to go fuck off. Just like what happened with Jose Mourinho. He started openly bashing his own players in the public media. And what did those players do? They said, fuck him. We're not going to play for him anymore. They're losing games left and right. Jose Mourinho gets sacked for the second time at Chelsea. That's what can happen in this game. And you can't have both. You cannot do both. But, that's my view on it. That's my opinion on it. I think Arsene Wenger was 100% correct. If Terry doesn't want it as bad as he said as he says he does, then from this point on, I don't want to see him as an Arsenal manager ever, because of his actions from this, and his actions even 9 years ago when he left us. I don't want to. I don't need that. I don't need that type of ego. I know Arsene Wenger has a huge ego himself, but again, we don't need that kind of shit here at Arsenal. We try to pride ourselves on being classy and having integrity and whatnot like that. And Arsene Wenger does have all that. But we don't need a guy that's going to be all about him, because it's not all about him. It's that day has gone and passed. So let's get in some transfer stuff, just some few tidbits, some things that are really scary coming out over the last about 24 hours, and that's about Higuain. Um, there is a rumor that Juventus is prepared to pay the release clause in Higuain's contract at Napoli. Napoli, I think he has one more year left. He already announced to Napoli that he's not going to re-sign with them. Um, the reports of his buyout clause are shaky at best right now. Um, I've seen it as low as 65 million euros and as high as now as 94 million euros, which seems like a ridiculous number. I don't know anybody who would put that kind of release clause on him. I think it's probably more in the 60 and 65 range. But Juventus, I guess, according to some reliable sources in Italy, that they're prepared to trigger his release clause and to pay that transfer fee. Now, if anybody knows who has been, even if you don't follow Juventus day in and day out, obviously everybody knows Juventus is. They're an Italian giant. They've won the league now, what, 5 or 6 straight years now. Made the Champions League final. Um, they're not a club who they're kind of like us in a way, to where we're not going to be paying out a huge sum of money for a certain player unless it's one of the top 10 players in the league, or in the world, mind you, not in the league but in the world. And Juventus never struck me as a team that would pay out 65 million euros for a single player. But once you think about it, you hear all the rumors of Manchester United going after Pogba, and you hear rumors of 90 million euros, 100 million euros. If Juventus is going to pay that money, if Juventus is going to pay that release clause, that means Pogba is going to United. I know Pogba didn't have the best Euros. Anybody can uh, admit that. I think even Pogba himself can admit that he had a very poor Euros, but he's still a fucking great player. The things that he can do, not too many other players can do, especially at that CM position. He's still very, very young. And that's a scary thought of him going to United. It's just a scary thought in general, because they're just buying up everybody. They don't even have Champions League football, and they're getting these type of class players coming to United. I know they can offer more wages than we can, but still, it's annoying to watch. It's annoying that we're just sitting here with one signing, and they're just gobbling up all the quality players, while we're just kind of sitting back doing nothing. I know supposedly we've had interest in Higuain, but no type of real bid, no type of real contact with the player or the agent. I guess his brother is his agent, I guess, as well. But that's a scary thought. So if you see Higuain going to Juventus, and they're willing to pay out that contract or that release clause, Pogba's going to United, no questions asked, because that means then Juventus has already agreed to the fee and agreed to sell him back to United, which is a funny thing because they just don't spend that type of money. They just don't. Especially you pull in the Morata buyback as well. The I think they got something like 23 or 27 million euros for that buyback from Real Madrid. And he's staying at Real Madrid. They already announced that Morata is staying at Real Madrid, so that's another striker off the board. Um, Arsenal only has two options now, one being Lukaku and the other being Lacazette. That's it. That's all that's left available. It's really a headache at this point, and it's really scary because okay, if we're not buying anybody from France, we're not buying anybody from Germany, we're definitely not buying anybody from Wales unless it's Gareth Bale, and that's not going to happen. Um, who's the fourth team? Oh, Portugal. We're not going to buy anybody from them. They don't have anybody good enough at this stage for us to buy. So that leaves two teams, France and Germany, are the only two teams that would go to the very end that they would not be ready for the opening game, which is August 13th, which is, I mean, Arsenal made a tweet 30 days. It's 30 days until the very first game. I mean, it's getting scary time now that we haven't bought anybody else except for Granit Xhaka. That's it. And that was late May, early June when we finally announced that. And we haven't bought anybody. Again, it might come down to back-to-back summers. One player, that's it. You cannot go forward as an organization, as a club, buying one player each transfer window. You can't get better that way. You can't get deeper that way. And then this might be year 5 for Olivier Giroud. That means it's going to be 5 seasons since RVP left. 5 seasons without a quality striker, without a world-class striker playing up top for Arsenal Football Club. 5 years of failure. People like to call this, Arsene Wenger, this visionary, and he makes wonders out of strikers. Then why aren't strikers knocking down the door and say, please buy me? Shit, you had Lacazette last summer favoring a tweet that he since deleted, though, of saying that Arsenal is interested and the player would be willing to sign. But then he unfavored it because it caused a huge media frenzy in the press. He wants to come here, but then Arsene Wenger doesn't rate him or whatever. It doesn't make any sense to me. Look how many players that he supposedly hasn't, in my last episode talking about the English and French generation. Look how many players that he did not rate on that French team who made it to the quarterfinals of the World Cup and made it to the final of the Euros. Look how many players: Griezmann, Payet, Pogba, Conte, almost that whole entire team, except for Giroud and Koscielny. That's it. And their entire bench on top of that. And all the other good French players sprinkled throughout Europe. And there's no way this can go down like this because if we don't sign anybody by next week, I would say we're in deep shit of signing anybody, for that matter. I know there's some reliable sources saying that Arsenal is in contact with Julian Draxler and his agent and possibly Wolfsburg. Um, that seems more of uh, that seems more real per se than Lacazette or Higuain or even Lukaku. Lukaku's name has just died off in the last probably 2 or 3 weeks. You just haven't heard his name anymore linked to Arsenal at all. It's very concerning because if you don't get a player in, whether it's a winger, a striker, who is available right now to train, we're in deep shit. That means we're not going to buy anybody. Because right now is the time to start, getting in shape, getting fit, getting accustomed to our playing style, and getting accustomed to all of his teammates. It's still going to take him maybe a month or two or something to get settled in. But if we don't do anything after, I think next week is the deadline for Arsenal. Unless we're buying someone from France or Germany, our deadline is next week. And if you don't see anybody getting bought, if you don't see a new transfer coming in, you're not going to see anybody for the rest of the window, except for maybe a panic buy a week or two, maybe a week before the deadline. Because then by that time, the season has started. We'll be having, I think it's about 3 games under our belt by that time. Maybe an injury happens. It just I want to tear my hair out. Giroud, Sanogo, Theo Walcott, and Chuba Akpom. That's our strike force going into next season. Because Danny Welbeck, he's not due back until next April, I think. And by that time, I mean the season's almost over anyway. So we're having Olivier Giroud, and supposedly Theo Walcott's going to be playing on the right wing anyway. That was his quote last year at the end of the season that he wants to be playing on the right wing instead of striker, which is that guy can't make up his mind. Arsene Wenger can't make up his mind of where he wants to play him. I mean, it's Giroud, Sanogo, Akpom. That's our strike force. That's fucking ridiculous. You have Giroud, who is going to be 30. I think he is 30 now, isn't he? And then you have Sanogo and Chuba Akpom, who are, what, 21 and 20, respectively? It's ridiculous. And we're considered a big club. What pisses me off about the Juve stuff, and any other club, mind you, is that they're willing to pay out that money for a player, but Arsenal doesn't. And God save Arsene Wenger if he does not buy anybody. Because if last second half of last year wasn't bad, if you didn't think that was bad, it's going to be worse this coming season. And it's going to get even worse when you see Ozil not sign a new contract, when you see Alexis Sanchez not sign a new contract, because guess what? Next summer, they're fucking gone. And if they do, good luck to us. Because no world class player will ever fucking come here ever again. We will have to overpay a significant price for a world class player to ever come here again. Because we have proven that best number 10 in the world, but yet we give him a donkey ass striker. When every single one of his former players, whether it's through the national team, Real Madrid, saying if you give him a world class striker, that guy will do wonders for you. Look at the season he had last year with the donkey ass Giroud up top. You imagine a player, imagine if we signed Higuain in that same summer. Imagine if we signed Lacazette last summer. Imagine if we signed Benzema when his name was being floated around last summer. Suarez, anybody. I mean, it's such a fucking joke. I mean, it really is. That you have this good of a player and you don't give him the tools to succeed. And on top of that, you're going to have Chaka in the back too, who is well known for his long balls, his accurate long balls. Trying to do fucking long balls to fucking Giroud? Are you kidding me? Did you see his snail pace run in the Euros? I mean, there was memes all over, gifs all over the fucking internet about it. It was hilarious. But yet you're gonna stick with him as a fucking striker because he scored against Romania and Iceland. Whippy fucking doodah. So it looks like it right now that Lacazette is the only one on on the stage right now. It would be a nice treat if Arsene Wenger finally said, you know what, fuck it. I'm buying Lacazette, I'm buying Draxler, let's go for it. Because that's what he should be doing. He made the bullshit excuse last summer that there is no one available. And you know what? He's going to use that same bullshit excuse again while players are just moving all over the place over the last 2, 3 weeks. But yet, no one's available? Bullshit. Oh, the Brexit. Oh, that ruined our chances of buying. Bullshit. Look at what fucking United is doing. It's just bullshit after bullshit, and I can't wait till he's out of the fucking club. Because he's only hurting us, he's not helping us. And if he doesn't buy anybody this summer, and if Xhaka is our only signing, if you're an AKB, you really have to just hide in a corner for the entire season because it's gonna be relentless. It's gonna be absolutely relentless, and I don't think he will be able to sign another 2-year contract unless he buys a striker. Well, supposedly we're in for a striker and a center back, which who knows who the center back is even. But if he goes out and buys Drexler and Lacazette, keeps Cullum Chambers on, makes him the third choice instead of, that's another thing. Per Mertesacker is going to be the captain, and another captain who's going to be sitting on the fucking bench for most of the year. I'm sick of these players getting chosen as captains when they don't even fucking play. I mean, our last true playing club captain was RVP. Again, almost 5 years ago. And it's just, I don't know. I can't talk about it anymore because it's really, you know, it just boils your blood, especially if you're an Arsenal fan. Most of these rumors that are floating around right now are just kind of like, whatever. It's you've been around long enough. You know now that it's just ridiculous, and you kind of make fun of the people who believe in every single fucking rumor that's out there because it's just like, come on. Um, but he needs to sign one of the two players, Lacazette or Draxler, to get everyone off his back because if he doesn't, it's going to be a shit show. I mean, from game one, it's just going to be toxic. It's going to be like the Aston Villa game 3 years ago, where people were screaming and chanting, spend the fucking money. I think it's going to be worse this time around. Because let's face it, our opening game, we're not going to have Alexis Sanchez. We're not going to have Ozil. I mean, all those guys will be just coming back a week prior to our opening game, probably. Because I think Arsene Wenger has given them at least a month off, so they can do their holidays and vacations and whatnot. And of course, Alexis Sanchez, he probably won't be back until late August. I mean, if anybody has seen his ankle and God, how that guy played through the rest of that game is beyond me. That guy is he's a fucking superhero. But he probably won't be back until late August. So are we really going to depend on Oxlade Chamberlain and Theo Walcott as our winners and Alex Iwobi, who is still young and unproven? I mean, it just, oh my God. Again, trying to, how, I don't get the faith in these players. I really don't. When any other big club, they would have sent them right out the fucking door. Not good enough. See you later. We're going to buy someone who is good enough. It's just an ongoing thing that's going to continue on happening until he's gone. But tell me what you guys think. Tell me your opinions. Do you think Arsene Wenger was right about giving Thierry Henry an ultimatum and then letting him go? Is your opinion on Thierry Henry changed over this course now? Do you think he actually loves the club like he says he does, or does he just love the money? Of course, on our transfer stuff, give me your opinion on that. If what are the odds right now of us actually signing anybody? It doesn't look good. It really doesn't look good, and it might be another terrible summer um, coming up. With what United's doing, Chelsea's going to focus on a league. United's going to focus on a league. Liverpool's going to focus on a league. I I don't know if I can see us making top four this year. That's how much doubt I have right now. The fact that we're not signing players to this team, and it is really shocking. But tell me what you guys think, and if anything else comes up over the next, whenever something comes up, I'll make a video. But if nothing comes up, there's really no point in getting any more pissed off and talking about Arsenal in a negative light because I want to talk some positivity about this club for once and really talk about the players and maybe the next positivity you won't see from me is until I'll probably do a prediction video type thing before the season even starts. But other than that, I'll see you guys later.